Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Something Comes Along podcast. My name is Gary Jones. And the premise of this podcast series is that people are carrying on with their daily lives, work, and that itself is hard enough. And then something comes along, could be an event, could be a piece of news that throws everything up in the air, and they have to navigate that news and carry on with their life. And both my guests today have a shared experience. So let me introduce them. I'm joined by Vicky Twibell, who is the Global Director of HR Business Partnering at the international law firm BCLP. Hello, Vicky.
Gary.
Thank you for joining us.
Welcome.
And I'm also joined by Ed Fitzgerald, who is the Director of Brand, Clients and Markets at the international law firm RPC. Hello, Ed.
Hi, Gary. Hello, everyone.
I've got both your job titles right, which is the most important achievement that I'll possibly achieve on this entire. Ed, can I start with you? Let's get to the crux of the matter. What was the news that came along into your life relatively recently?
So the news that came into my life relatively recently, which is probably coming up for about 18 months ago now, was a diagnosis of young-onset Parkinson's disease. I place particular emphasis on the word young because that encapsulates more about me than anything else. But came completely out of the blue. Had no sense of what might be going on, and left me sort of in a very strange place, wondering what the future was going to hold.
And can I just ask, young onset Parkinson's? I'd heard of the expression early onset Parkinson's. Is that the same thing? A different word for it?
Yes, pretty much. Yeah, but I like the word young.
Well, of course, quite rightly so. And Vicky, that must sound familiar.
Yes, I'm just over 2 years diagnosed now. So I also have young onset Parkinson's disease. And why it's called young onset is if you have shown symptoms before the age of 50, you are part of that bracket. And 1 in 20 people with Parkinson's disease has young onset.
And sticking with you, Vicky, on symptoms, I mean, in terms of you getting diagnosed, I mean, did you have symptoms and went to get that checked out and found out? How did you realise you had it in the first place?
Yeah, I had some strange set of symptoms which just weren't obvious at all to me. So I didn't really have a tremor, which is one of the typical symptoms of Parkinson's disease that people would recognize. My hand swelled up and went a different color. A slight twitch in my left leg if I was under pressure at work or stressed. So I thought that was down to that. But what made me go to the doctor is my typing speed went much slower with my left hand, and I was making lots of mistakes when writing emails and it was just taking longer to get like basic emails done. So I went to the GP, and the GP suggested I had a trapped nerve in my neck, maybe from sitting at a desk. So referred me to a neurologist, because anything neck related apparently is a neurologist's part. And so I went to see the neurologist, thinking I had a trapped nerve. I think Ed was very similar.
Is that a similar story, Ed?
Yeah, very, very similar. Slightly different initial symptoms. So for me, it started out running with my wife and I think the dog as well. My wife had noticed that when I was running, I wasn't swinging my left arm, and we didn't really think much of it. And again, we sort of self-diagnosed a trapped nerve or something muscular, again, probably as a result of sitting at a desk too much or riding a bike too much. And cutting a long story short, it was only when, very similar to Vicky, I started finding it more difficult to type with my left hand that I thought I'd go and see a GP, who again said probably a trapped nerve, but also, like Vicky, then referred me on to a neurologist who said it was a lot worse than that. And here we are.
And how rare is it, for people of your age for this to happen to? Is this, are you both very unlucky?
Well, yes. And I did some, and there's stats all over the place about Parkinson's, but certainly my understanding is that it's something like in the UK, 1 in 37 people get Parkinson's, and of those, as Vicky said, is it 1 in 20, Vicky, are under the age of 50? So there's only 150 odd thousand people with Parkinson's in the UK alone, of which obviously 5% of them are our kind of age. So yes, unlucky to get it, and even more unlucky to get it as young as we have.
There's no Parkinson's in my family, so it can be inherited, but I don't have an inherited version. And interestingly, this is the fastest growing neurological condition in the world now. And it's, if you have a neurological condition, it's the one you want to get. It's like the least worst, apparently,
Okay.
of all the conditions. So we're lucky in a way, Ed.
Obviously, this news, I mean, I can't imagine. Of course, I can't imagine what this news, was like to time digest. But can I move on to, how you told people? What did you do? What was you can't have a strategy for things like this, but what did you decide to do in terms of communication, family and beyond? Vicky?
I'm a bit of a sharer for those that know me. And so I decided to tell everybody as quickly as I could. The first person that I needed to tell was my husband, Simon, because thinking I only had a trapped nerve, I went to the neurologist by myself. So an interesting conversation with him in the car park of the hospital, asking him if he was sitting down and telling him the news. We very quickly told our 2 teenage children. I've got 2 lovely boys. I told them the same night, and then started telling family and friends. And I think I came out on Facebook, actually, which I thought was the quickest way of telling everybody. So yeah, I was pretty open from the start.
And did that help you?
I think so, yes, because I didn't have to keep telling everybody, and I didn't have to remember who I'd told and who I hadn't told. So yeah, looking back, I'm pleased I did it that way. I'm not sure that it helped me, but it helped me get the news out.
So it's slightly different for me. I mean, a very similar experience in terms of going to the hospital on my own because I didn't really think there was much to worry about, and then having to have that phone call with my wife Abby from the car park. We decided not to tell the kids. So I have 2 teenage kids as well. Decided not to tell the kids immediately, simply because at that point it was only a suspected diagnosis, and I had to have a MRI scan on my brain, and then what's called a DAT scan, also on my brain further down the line, just to definitively diagnose. So I waited until that point, and it was certain. But I was quite quick to tell people at work. In fact, I think I told people at work that afternoon, simply because I was one of my first thoughts was, am I going to be able to continue working in the same way as I have done previously? And like Vicky and probably like most people listening to this call, we have very busy, very demanding jobs that put a lot of strain on us, and I wasn't sure how that was going to impact. So I told my boss, who's the COO at RPC, and also the managing partner, and a couple of other partners who I work really, really closely with, which was helpful, actually, not least because they were unbelievably supportive. And I really felt like the firm had my back and still does. So, but I then sort of let it filter out a little bit. I didn't sort of manage, sort of a big announcement until I decided I would run the London Marathon to raise money for Cure Parkinson's, at which point I pushed it out everywhere in a bid to boost my fundraising.
Is that the one coming up? Is that the imminent
Yes,
one?
yep. As we record this, 3 weeks yesterday.
Oh yeah. What we'll do actually is put a link to that fundraising as well when we post this. Assuming we do post this, and it's not a complete disaster, but let's assume we do post this, and we'll put a link out for your fundraising. So good for you. And Vicky, your work being good for you as well.
Yeah, work were and have still been amazing. I too told my boss on the day. Quite strange for me as an HR person being on the other side of the table, because I'm more used to being the person that's being told news from others. So yeah, they've been incredibly supportive, well, trying to understand and really, asking me what I need and what help I might need. I too was worried about my job, thinking maybe my career was over. And it's very important to me and has been for many years. But some senior people in my company told me about people they'd worked with before and that it shouldn't let it stop me, and please don't worry about it. And so yeah, all really, really nice, comforting things to hear in the early days.
Good to hear. And generally, has anything surprised either of you about people's reactions? They could be friends or family or people that you don't know that well. Has anything surprised you either way?
I don't know I don't know if I'm surprised so much, but I've been very heartened and reassured, and to sound slightly grandiose about it, that it's brought out the best in humanity. I think everyone's been so lovely and so supportive, and there've been occasions where I've just been queuing for a coffee in the office, and a partner I haven't seen for ages just walks in, doesn't say anything, just comes and gives me a big hug. Didn't even know that they knew, and it's put me back in touch with a lot of people who maybe fallen out of touch with over the years, which has been really nice. So yeah. I mean, it's been a really positive experience in that sense, and I wouldn't recommend it. There's other ways of staying in touch with people, but if we're looking at silver linings, that's definitely one.
You've got to know Vicky as well because of this.
Yeah, no, Vicky and I have become regular lunch companions. What's the name of the place we go to?
Mino, it's a
Camino, that's right. Yeah,
Spanish place, yeah, but we
yeah,
can
very nice.
recommend it.
Yeah, very good.
Vicky, what about yourself?
Yeah, ditto. Just how kind everyone's been, I think is a good word for it. But one thing that surprised me or has surprised me is the connections that I've made with others. So, Gary, you found out about my Parkinson's and said, "Do you mind if I introduce you to Ed, who I know has just recently had some news?" Locally, I've had people say, "Do you know this person? Do you know that?" I mean, it's actually quite surprising how many people have this condition, and how many of my friends know people in the same boat. But yes, there's three really lovely ladies my age that live very locally to me, and we've formed a strong friendship, and that's been really helpful, I think, for all of us. And yeah, meeting Ed in a similar work position to me, just round the corner from me in London, has been a really positive thing that's come out of this, I'd say.
These are people you didn't know, those three people who live locally. Oh, wow.
No, no. I knew people that knew them, and then they introduced me to them.
What about external support in organisations, charities? Have you come across any that have really helped you?
Personally, Parkinson's UK, I'll give them a shout out. They've been amazing. Their information on their website is fantastic. Another thing I've found really helpful is another podcast called Movers and Shakers, and
Okay.
they send out a weekly podcast with some quite well-known individuals that have got together. They have Parkinson's, and I went to a meetup last April on World Parkinson's Day at Westminster, and that was really great to meet other people with the disease.
Yeah, and similar for me. I was very lucky to be put in touch with the chief executive of another big Parkinson's charity called Cure Parkinson's, through a family connection to my friend of my dad's who's had Parkinson's for a long time and done a lot of fundraising for Cure Parkinson's. Put me in touch with Helen Matthews, who's the CEO there. And she very kindly lent me half an hour of her time at very short notice to basically talk me through, all the things I should be thinking about in terms of getting support and care and information to help navigate the early days. And she was superbly helpful, and that's largely why I've decided to do the marathon for them, because they need all the funds they can get to help people like Vicky and me.
And again, as mentioned before, as well as your marathon link, these organisations you've mentioned in the last few minutes will we'll give them a shout out as well when we post this. So because one of the benefits of doing this, I hope, is that there will be people who maybe have just had a diagnosis, or it may not be Parkinson's, it could be anything, couldn't it? Just hearing people's stories as to how they've managed so far and how they've communicated what's helped and not helped, could be really advantageous to those people. And I was going to say before, there are still such things as trapped nerves in your neck, aren't there? There are some people.
Yeah,
Yeah, there are
far
some
more
people.
common.
It does not mean, yeah, number of times you hear, go and get checked out, go and whatever an ailment, illness might be. It just shows, doesn't it? That it is worthwhile doing it. And how are you both now? I mean, how are you both symptoms wise? And has anything surprised you about, how you've coped or not coped over the last, year or two?
Yeah, I've surprised myself as to how I've coped. I think those who know me well would probably describe me as more on the sort of pessimistic end of the optimism pessimism scale, and I think I probably would have expected myself to be have found myself in a sort of a darker place, finding it difficult to cope and sort of shutting myself away a bit. But actually, I found a new optimism through this experience simply because that's the only way to be. Really, there's nothing we can do about it other than follow the guidance from a medication and from a lifestyle point of view. And there may come a time when life becomes much more difficult than it is now. So until that time comes, I want to make the most of being able to do as many things as I possibly can right now. Enjoy my life, enjoy being around my friends, my family, continuing to work. So yeah, I'm much more positive than I thought I would ever be. Not that I ever thought I'd be in this position, but if you'd
No,
asked me 10 years ago, I think my perception would have been slightly different.
thank you.
Yeah, unlike Ed, I'm not running the London Marathon, but sadly, but I'm a glass half full person, and have always tried to see the positive in everything. It's pretty hard to see the positive in this when you're first diagnosed, but very much like Ed, um, it sounds odd, but I'm the happiest I've been in years at the moment. I think now I've accepted that I have it and it's going to be a part of me now going forward. There's worse things to have is what kind of keeps me going. And I think we've all lost friends along the way. But I'm still here. And this is not going to kill me. It might change my life significantly in the future, but for now, I'm going to enjoy everything, my job, my career, my friends, my family. And yeah, I've got a much more positive attitude than even I had a few years ago, I think.
Good for you both. And in terms of advice to other people, who, as mentioned before, may have just received a diagnosis or whatever it might be and don't know how to communicate to others or how to start off. Anything you've learned as tips that you'd like to share?
I would say there is no right or wrong way to react. It's whatever works for you and whatever makes you most comfortable and whatever's helpful. I mean, one of the things that I really worried about was I was worrying about how other people felt like they should react around me, and that bothered me more than the condition itself, because I didn't want people to think that they had to come and be sympathetic. I didn't want people to think they should feel bad by not mentioning it, and and equally, they didn't want people to think they couldn't make jokes about it, because I think everyone has different ways of dealing with it. So I think that's the same for us as people who are suffering with something, is deal with it however you think works best for you. And what you'll find is that those people around you will fall into a pattern that works for them as well, and you'll find a way collectively to get through it.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
I mean, it's really difficult to give advice, I think, because it's also very personal. everybody's experience of Parkinson's is different, and there are over 50 different symptoms. So even Ed's and my Parkinson's is different. So it's hard to give advice. For me, just really watch what social media you look at, and which internet sites you search, because at first, it's quite overwhelming when you see what might happen. And it can be very upsetting to see all of that. Not many people post positive stories; they post the bad stories. So just, I think my advice would be just be careful what you watch and what you listen to, because there is positive stuff out there. And Ed and I think, have both researched different ways, like with diets and exercise and different therapies you can use on top of the drugs. So yeah, just be careful what you watch, because it's not the same for everybody.
Thank you. And thank you both for, being so open and joining me today and talking about it. As I mentioned before, it will be a massive help to other people, people you may never know. So I've known you both a long time, and I admire and respect you both anyway, and always have done. But I do even more so now. So thank you both.
Thank you, Gary.
Yeah. Thank you very much for listening to this edition of Something Comes Along, and we'll see you again soon.